Hello and good morning, everyone, and welcome to our CARE online talk. Today we will focus on Ireland as the 10th of our country-specific online talks. My name is Georg Krawitz. I'm Head of Section International Research Marketing at the German Academic Exchange Service, the DAD, and I will be your host today. Before we start, and as people are still joining the online talk, please allow for a few housekeeping remarks. We kindly ask to keep your microphones muted when you are not speaking and have your cameras turned off as well. Please feel free to use the chat for questions during the online talk. We will try to pick as many as possible and hopefully can provide respective answers. There will be a designated time for questions and discussion after the presentations of all our speakers, so please keep your questions in mind. And or as a more interactive option, during this final discussion part of the online talk, you may also ask your questions by turning on your microphone. In case you prefer to ask a question anonymously, this is also fine with us. If so, please use the private chat option, write to me, Georg Krawitz, only, and put anonymous in front of the question. Many thanks. There is an individual audience at each online talk. I would therefore like to start by shortly introducing to the CARE project as such and its current state. CARE stands for Career Advancement for Refugee Researchers in Europe and is a Horizon 2020 and Science for Refugee funded project. In the consortium, partners are ARCA, the Academic Cooperation Association Brussels, EDUFI, the Finnish National Agency for Education Helsinki, and we, the DAD, located in Bonn. The project is running since January 2019 and will end in December 2020. The project's aim is to support refugee researchers through coordinated and tailored provision of information needed for their entry and integration in the research and development labor market within selected countries. How do we try to achieve this? Well, we are developing needs-based guidance and provide relevant information on employment requirements and opportunities in the residence countries. Plus, we disseminate project results to stakeholder networks and a wider community in Europe. That does also include Eurexis. Our target destinations are 10 selected European countries. In alphabetical order, they are Austria, Belgium/Flanders, Finland, France, Germany, Ireland, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, and the Netherlands. Today's focus country, as already mentioned, is Ireland. This chart shows the timeline and the main activities of the project and which partner institution was or currently is in charge of respective activities. We are now in the 5th and final stage, DAD online talks. And as a result of all previous activities, stakeholder mapping, focus group interviews, and employer surveys, we are currently conducting these talks to share relevant country-specific information collected by all 3 partners and gather input on needed actions on national and EU level. For updates, we kindly invite you to keep an eye on the CARE project Twitter account, where we will advertise all project findings. But now, please let me share the main key findings from the mentioned focus group interviews and employer survey for Ireland with you. Focus group interviews were conducted last year in November, and the following main challenges have been identified. There are limited possibilities and even barriers during at times, quite long asylum process. Bearing this status, one has no complete access to the labor market. Attitude and roles can be obstacles. Being a researcher and being an asylum seeker at the same time is challenging to combine. Which are the needs and recommendations for researchers with refugee background? There's a need for more networking and creating contacts more actively. Tailored information and access to information on specific job alerts would be beneficiary. And the asylum process takes a long time. Ways to speed up the asylum process would be helpful. And I think this is something that is also relevant for other countries in this project. So what are the main findings from the employer survey? Let's have a closer look. Positive impact factors incentives for hiring researchers with refugee background are as follows. For more than half of the employers, the professional skills of the researcher or candidate had a major or moderate effect on the process of hiring a candidate with refugee background. Language skills do play a major role in the hiring process too. For 57%, this has a major effect. In terms of the financial support available for researcher candidate, i.e. Through funding programs, a major or at least moderate effect was mentioned. And for 57% of the organizations, social responsibility of the organization plays a role or major or moderate role in the hiring process. And what do the main obstacles look like? More than half of the interviewees noted that time-consuming recognition processes of the qualifications of the researchers obtained outside Ireland does have a major effect on the hiring process. An obstacle for the non-EEA researchers is the right to travel without visa, which is in particular an issue as Ireland is a non-Schengen country. It can limit the ability for researchers to attend conferences, to fully participate in cooperative projects with partners, or to effectively do networking. If you would like to have a more and detailed information overview, we kindly invite you to have a look at both the focus group and employer survey, which we provide on the website of our partner ARCA, and will also put in the chat. You can also find the link at the end of our presentation, which we are happy to share. This brings me to our designated speakers of today, who we invited to reflect on some of the outcomes for Ireland. They will present interesting programs and initiatives and will share with us insights into their work. Dr. Roja Fazaeli is Assistant Professor for Islamic Civilizations at Trinity College Dublin and also a representative for Scholars at Risk SAR Network Ireland. She will talk about available support structures and national programs for researchers with refugee background. Our second speaker will be Micol Martinelli. She's a senior executive in the Research and Innovation Internationalization Division of Enterprise Ireland, the government organization responsible for the development and growth of Irish enterprises in global markets. She will introduce a program for market-focused research, which connects companies, researchers, and research institutions with one another. Our third speaker will be Dr. Amin Sharifi Isalu. He's a lecturer in the Department of Sociology and Criminology at University College Cork. We are glad that he will share his pathway and his experiences on integrating as a researcher into the Irish research landscape. But let us now start with Mrs. Fazaeli. Roja is Assistant Professor of Islamic Civilizations at Trinity College Dublin and a warden of Trinity Hall, a residential learning community of about 1,000 students. Roja has published widely on subjects of Islamic feminisms, female religious authorities, women's rights in Iran, and the relationship between human rights and religion. Her last book is Islamic Feminisms, Rights and Interpretations Across Generations in Iran, which was published at Routledge in 2017. She's the chairperson of the Board of Directors on the Immigrant Council of Ireland and currently on the editorial board of the journal Religion and Human Rights. Roja also serves as the representative for Scholars at Risk at Trinity College, Dublin. She previously served on the executive boards of the Irish Refugee Council, United Nations Women Ireland, the Association for the Study of Persianate Societies, as well as the Board of Directors of Amnesty International Ireland. Roja, welcome, and many thanks for joining our group of speakers today. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Garrett. First of all, I suppose I give a very brief background to Scholars at Risk. So I'm here, thank you very much for your very generous introduction. I'm here, first of all, as the representative of the Scholars at Risk Network Ireland. So the quick background to Scholars at Risk Network internationally. So Scholars at Risk Network, SAR for short, is an international network of more than 500 higher education institutions in 39 countries, working to protect threatened intellectuals and to promote academic freedom and university values worldwide. Scholars at Risk knows that the higher education sector built on these values is essential to progress on any number of critical issues, from environment to poverty, governance to equality, security to health. So Scholars at Risk works first by protecting threatened intellectuals, academic researchers, writers, artists, human rights defenders, and more Scholars at Risk is looking at the asylum system and the refugees in different countries as well. And they do so by advocating on their behalf, such as when they are wrongly imprisoned, and in the most extreme cases by arranging positions of sanctuary at network member institution for scholars fleeing persecution and violence. Scholars at Risk also works through research, training, and advocacy aimed at building up the capacity of local communities to expose and address the root causes of intellectual repression and to create the conditions in which knowledge and education may flourish. So the Scholars at Risk Ireland network formed as a partnership between Universities Ireland and the Scholars at Risk network in September 2009. Just to give you a background, Universities Ireland itself was founded in 2003 by the 9 university presidents on the island of Ireland to promote and develop cooperation between their institutions. That number has actually increased since. SAR Ireland was actually launched by Iranian Nobel Peace Prize winner Dr. Shirin Ebadi at an event in Trinity College where I currently teach. This partnership network of 9 universities together provides support to threatened academics around the world, including by arranging temporary placements in Ireland to allow them to safely continue their work. As the first case, I thought probably I'm best placed to talk about the work that we have done in Trinity College first to support scholars at risk. So not all scholars at risk would be in the asylum process, and not all the people that we help through scholars at risk in the asylum process are necessarily researchers per se. So sometimes we also do help students at different stages as well. The Trinity College Dublin became a member of the Scholars at Risk network in 2009. And in the past 11 years has hosted 6 scholars by providing them temporary academic and study positions. As a SAR member, Trinity has helped these scholars to escape dangerous conditions and to continue their important work. In return, the scholars have contributed to Trinity through their work, research, and human rights activities. It might be good here to mention that even though the scholars we hosted, they didn't come from the asylum process per se, but at every stage of kind of the process when they were in Trinity as a scholars at risk, I can say most of them at some point thought that there was no going back to their own home countries, and they did consider applying for asylum, but it's as you know, it's not that easy once you're out of the country for a period of time. Also, apart from hosting scholars, the TCD SAR committee ran a number of scholars at risk lecture series. So one of them was in 2010, 2011. We got funding from Trinity's Equality Fund to do that. The series featured scholars at risk from Iran, Iraq, and Eritrea who gave public lectures in TCD. In 2015, the TCD SAR committee hosted the SAR speaker tour and welcomed the scholar to TCD from Pakistan. In 2016, Trinity hosted the Scholars at Risk conference, opened and attended by the President of Ireland, Michael D. Higgins. And then in 2017, 2018, both myself and two other lecturers in Trinity, mainly within the Trinity's Department of Near and Middle Eastern Studies, started to work with the students on SAR's academic freedom monitoring project. So we thought if we actually managed to get the students involved, it would make it a little bit more kind of known across college. So the main challenges we faced in Trinity in regards to hosting scholars came, one is securing sufficient funding, both from Trinity's administration and from outside funding sources. So sometimes we had, so Universities Ireland, for example, every year has a membership fee from the scholars from the universities, and they leave that on the side for if a university wants to host a scholar. But it's really not enough in a sense to give them any real kind of job. You know, if it's 10,000 euro maximum, sometimes we can get is 20,000 euro. But you know, like if you want to bring an assistant professor at the starting level, at least you're talking about 35,000, and then there is other costs as well. And then the other challenge that we've faced is around visa and immigration issues as well. Furthermore, the SAR committee at Trinity had until this year been structured in an ad hoc fashion. In other words, it had been incredibly difficult to find a departmental or administrative home for the committee. Only recently, in the past months, the new office of the Associate Vice Provost for Equality, Diversity and Inclusion has agreed to be a permanent home for Trinity's SAR committee. So this kind of institutional support is really, really important. And but it has taken me a long time to kind of achieve it in Trinity. Now let me talk about activities of SAR Ireland in other universities as well. So University of Maynooth is another one. As a member of Scholars at Risk, has hosted scholars from Iran and Iraq. In 2017, the university hosted a conference, Academic Freedom in Times of, or in Turbulent Times. They also hosted a talk by scholars from Pakistan. And Maynooth also works with the students on the Academic Freedom Monitoring Project through the law school there. Which researches and reports attacks on higher education communities throughout the world. Also noteworthy is that Maynooth is also host to Scholars at Risk Europe, which is the European office of the Global Scholars at Risk Network, which was launched at the European Parliament in 2018. It represents the culmination of nearly 2 decades of partnership between European higher education institutions and global scholars at risk as well. The one case that I wanted to talk about specifically, especially for the questions raised around scholars who are in the asylum process or have refugee status, is the example of an Iranian scholar who is being hosted at the moment at the Irish Centre for Human Rights at the National University of Ireland, Galway. And actually, Galway, the Irish Centre, they have managed to host scholars and kind of get around some of the institutional difficulties that other universities have had. And I can talk more to that maybe around questions and answers as well. So this Iranian scholar is presently being hosted at the Irish Centre for Human Rights. She is a very well-known women's rights activist and a supporter of nonviolent resistance. She basically spent the last 3 decades empowering survivors and victims of human rights abuses. She herself has lost 6 family members to the executions in Iran, and this is between 1980 to 1988, mainly her siblings. Actually, she came to Ireland with Frontline Defenders, and while she was here, she actually got she had a court case that was carried out in absentia, and she got 3 terms of imprisonment, around 11 years. It was very clear that she could not go back, and she's in her early 60s. As you can imagine, her English is not good, but you know, she has written extensively on a lot of kind of nonviolent resistance and victim support. From the start, she was like, I'm going to go back to Iran and be imprisoned. So we talked to her a lot. She was in contact with the Scholars at Risk network, and at the same time, we thought, this is, you know, she cannot go back to Iran. So the best thing for her is to seek asylum here. But for those of you who might be not very familiar with the asylum system in Ireland, is once you seek asylum, there is a center called the Direct Provision Center. There's a lot of criticism around how these are run and how people are treated. So you're talking about a 60-year-old Iranian woman who ends up in the Direct Provision Center in west of Ireland. And anyway, we worked with the Irish Centre for Human Rights, and also there was some funding available from Universities Ireland to host a scholar, and they found some extra funding as well. The Irish Centre decided that they were going to host this scholar. But the budget wasn't enough. So the center itself, not again the university, they had to find some extra funding, but they had to do this from the center itself. And then on the other hand, her English wasn't you know at a level that she could engage in teaching, for example, or in seminars. So that was very difficult. So she found it very hard to fully integrate. And then the other problem is housing in Ireland. So she found it extremely difficult to find housing. So she was actually staying in the direct provision and coming and going. And now, of course, is the context of COVID. So this one case study actually highlights what challenges there are around universities hosting asylum seekers or those who even have refugee status as researchers. Just to mention other universities as well: University College Dublin, Dublin City University, University College Cork, University of Ulster, all have been involved in similar initiatives to host scholars and to organize scholars at risk events. They have also faced similar challenges when it comes to the hosting of scholars, in particular when it comes to securing funding and visas. So when Irish universities host scholars at risk from refugee and asylum seeker communities, it often makes sense to work with University of Sanctuary Ireland, which is an initiative to encourage and celebrate the good practices of universities, colleges, and institutes in welcoming refugees, asylum seekers, and other migrants into their university communities, particularly by fostering a culture of welcome and inclusion for all those seeking sanctuary. So University of Sanctuary, I do have to say, supports mainly younger scholars or younger people. So usually coming in to do an undergraduate studies. But I think it would make a real sense for us to work closer with University of Sanctuary. So in finishing, I would mention a few other research and civil society institutions which have been sources of support in kind to scholars at risk in the past, which might be envisioned to play additional roles of partnership and support in the future. So you have some of the research funding institution, the Irish Research Council. So IRC invests in people, skills, and ideas across all disciplines that will deliver new possibilities for the future within Ireland and beyond. It's very, very competitive. It's, you need extremely good English and grant writing skills to write a grant for IRC. Science Foundation Ireland, SFI, provides grants for researchers from around the world who wish to relocate to Ireland, and those already based in Ireland, for outstanding investigators, for conferences and symposia, for collaboration with industry. And then we have Frontline Defenders. So Frontline Defenders was founded in Ireland in 2001 with the aim of protecting human rights defenders at risk, people who work non-violently for any or all of the rights enshrined in UDHR. I have to say that Frontline has been one of the NGOs that have been absolutely brilliant. They've helped us tremendously a lot with placement of scholars at risk. And just to conclude, academic freedom continues to face threats from various directions, from authoritarian regime, the exigencies of war and occupation, and intolerant state and non-state actors. So it's important to muster all means possible for safeguarding academic freedom and the condition for critical thinking in these turbulent times, especially to support refugee researchers. In order to legitimize academic freedom as a right that transcends international boundaries, national support and funding structures must continue to be strengthened, including capacity building measures for academic freedom support. These same structures are good value for money, as they also provide tools for successful integration, particularly with regard to peer group networking and psychosocial support. As can be seen from my previous comments, better coordination and more sustained commitment is needed across the board with regard to national and institutional funding and support commitments for academic freedom and the embodiment of this freedom which scholars at risk holds so high. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for a presentation and providing us and the audience with useful insight, Roja. It covered a broad range from oversight as well as one individual, so to say, storytelling of the lady who tried to make and hopefully will make her way into the Irish academic community. I think we will come back on one or the other of the, within the final questions and answers part of this online talk. And now it's my time now to hand over to our second speaker, which will be Micol Martinelli. She's a senior executive in the Research and Innovation Internationalization Division of Enterprise Ireland, the government organization responsible for the development and growth of Irish enterprises in world markets. Micol has over 20 years of experience with EU programs and policies. She has engaged multi-million EU-funded projects and carried out advocacy work in the field of entrepreneurship and innovation. She has worked in the European Commission and the European Parliament and in a number of private as well as public sector bodies. She has 2 master's degrees in political science as well as in international relations and is fluent in 3 languages. So Micol, welcome and many thanks for being with us here today too. We, and as I'm sure the audience will be very much interested to hear about what you have briefly mentioned, opportunities to find one's way into the Irish market-focused research area. The floor is now yours, Micol. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kerrick, and thank you for the invitation. So it's a pleasure for me to be here with you today and present this unique opportunity to participate in a kind of well-rounded program co-funded by Enterprise Ireland and the European Union, which is called Career Fit Plus. Career Fit Plus is all about fostering career opportunities for experienced researchers on our side, on one side, and on the other side is to increase collaborative research through basically market-focused projects that will bring together companies, researchers, host academic institutions, and technology centers and gateways. Career Fit Plus is a follow-on program of an existing program, Career Fit, which has been there for 3 years. So if we go to the next slide, I'll just give you basically a snapshot. Through Career Fit, we were able to attract 50 international experienced researchers coming from all around the world with different backgrounds and experience. And they're now in Ireland for nearly 3 years, working with 38 different companies in all areas of research, 10 different higher education institutions in Ireland, and 8 different technology centers. And As you can see on this slide, there's a link there. If you want to get an idea of the kind of projects that have been funded through CareerFit, just follow the link to the case studies and you get an idea of the profile of the researchers that were selected, the companies, and the academic institutions that are involved in this program. Now, moving on to the CareerFit Plus program, the one that we are currently recruiting for. So as I mentioned earlier, it's co-funded by Enterprise Ireland and EU under the Marie Skłodowska-Curie co-fund actions. The idea is to, again, identify through a competitive process 50 international experienced researchers that would bring new skills to the Irish companies. Again, the idea is to have each project under the umbrella of either a technology center or a technology gateway in Ireland. And basically, the first call for proposal has already gone through. So we were able to identify the first 25 fellows. Now, the second call is open until the end of the year, and through that we will recruit the final 25. Next slide, please. So in terms of the eligibility of the candidates, so this is pretty much in line with all the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions. So it's basically if you are a postdoc, you will comply with the experience research type 1. If you don't have a PhD, you will enter into the experience research type 2 eligibility criteria if you have more than 4 years of full-time research experience post-master's degree. The second criteria is the mobility. So basically any experienced researcher of any nationality can apply as long as they haven't been in Ireland for more than 12 months prior to the call deadline. So even researchers who are already in Ireland, as long as they haven't been here for more than 12 months before the 31st of December, they would be eligible to apply. And as you can see on the slide, there's a specific reference to researchers with a refugee status there. Finally, obviously, the language criteria is also important. So we would require applicants to be able to demonstrate that they have a sufficient level of English. And if you go to the terms and conditions of the call, you will be able to establish this either through a certificate that you will have gained or through what we call a kind of a self-assessment of your level of English. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, one of the conditions to apply for this program is basically to have the project under the framework of either a technology center or a technology gateway. And what I wanted to show you here is basically the full list of technology centers and technology gateways currently operating in Ireland. These are basically kind of the umbrellas under which collaborative research takes place. They facilitate collaborations between, on the one hand, the academic and research institutions, and on the other hand, companies with an interest to develop their research development and innovation. So as you can see from this list, it basically covers all areas of research where obviously there's an industry demand for it. So you will probably spot, an area that would be directly applicable to you if you're interested in applying. Next slide, please. The application process is, well, first of all, it's online. It's done through a system which is called Smart Simple. It's pretty much driven by the applicant, so the experienced research himself or herself. And as I said, at the application stage, the applicant will have to contact a host institution, so an academic or a research intensive institution, as well as a partner company, or or maybe to get to the partner company through the host institution. And finally, as I said, a technology center and gateway. So all the different pieces of the puzzle need to be there at the application stage, and no application will be considered complete if you know, they're not all there at the application stage. In addition to this, the applicant will have to upload 2 letters of reference from 2 different referees, so people who know the applicant and the applicant's work well. And after the deadline of the 31st of December, the host institution, and in particular the research office in the host institution, will have the opportunity to either endorse or reject, or finally to ask for a few revisions to the applicant himself or herself. So there's a second deadline just for the research offices in the host institutions to be able to endorse the applications. And after that, they will basically come to us. So in the next slide, I will show you what the evaluation process is like. It kind of mirrors a typical Horizon 2020 evaluation process. So what typically happens in Brussels. The eligibility check is conducted by Enterprise Ireland, but after that, there's a 2-step process for evaluation. The first one being the remote evaluation. So every single application will be assessed by 3 different independent experts that are all based remotely. And after this first evaluation, it will go to what we call the inner assessment board. So the assessors will convene to Dublin in March next year, well, COVID-19 measures permitting, and they will have the opportunity to review all the applications and to come to a consensus of the final ranking. And after this, obviously, we will communicate all the results to the applicants, including feedback of you know, the assessors' points on the application. Next slide, please. As you can see from the slide, the evaluation criteria, again, they're pretty much aligned with the Marie-Skłodowska reaction. So the track record and the profile of the applicants, or the researcher, weights quite a bit in the overall score. So 35% of the overall score is based on that. The second element is the training and career development that has been outlined in the application. Then the quality of the work program, so the project proposal basically, and finally the quality of the host organization, the mentors, and the support arrangements that will be put in place. And now I will go into the details of each one of them in terms of kind of, you know, lessons learned from the previous calls. So next slide, please. So that's just to give you an idea of the scoring. It can be anything from 0 to 5. We are accepting, you know, decimals as well. So it can be, I don't know, 4.2, 4.3, etc. So there's a very, sometimes it's a very thin line between what's being funded and what's, for instance, it's in the reserve list. So as I mentioned earlier, what I would like to do today is just to give you some tips if you're planning to apply, on how to increase the chances that your application is successful. So next slide, please. The results, overall, the results of the previous call is, first of all, that scoring above the threshold isn't sufficient. So the threshold being 70%. What we've seen with the first call is that only the candidates that score above 85%, so 85 wasn't even sufficient, above 85% actually got their proposals funded. The second element is that, and it really, it's heartbreaking sometimes for me to see these cases, is that sometimes the applicant would have a wonderful CV. The project idea is very solid, as well as the host institution and the partner company, or a mix of this, but they just weren't able to kind of spell it out for the reviewers. And because the reviewers are pretty much requested to just stick to what's written and to not basically assume anything. Basically, they will just be able to mark proposals highly when everything is clearly spelled out. So again, another piece of advice is, if you're planning to apply, is to really spell it out, and don't assume that the reviewer would just understand it when it's, you know, in between the lines, what you the message that you're trying to pass. Also to bear in mind that the reviewers are a mix of experts in this area of research, but also experts in other areas, like for instance commercialization, IP, etc. So you need to be able to impress, if you like, both profiles, and therefore that's why it's important to really clearly explain everything from your CV to the project idea, and to why that particular company and that particular host institution are the perfect match for what you're trying to do. Thirdly is, and I've seen it particularly in the consensus meeting, when the part where you're basically explaining what you're planning to do in the near, medium, and long-term future is very important too. And sometimes it can really make a difference of, you know, whether a proposal is funded or not. So assessors like also to kind of, you know, sympathize with the applicant, and they like to feel that they're that actually we are investing in individuals that really see this opportunity as just one additional step in the direction that they want to go. And finally, I've said it many times, you know, applicants leaving it to the last moment to basically submit the application and making, you know, small revisions till the very last minute. And this would basically prevent them from having like a new set of eyes look at the proposal and give feedback and ideas on how to improve it. As I said, the research office in all the host institutions are very happy to review the proposal if you know, they're given enough time before the deadline. So another final piece of advice is just to ask for this basically additional revision to take place. So not just, don't leave it, you know, between yourself and the academic mentor to actually look at the proposal, but get some an external person to read the application as well. Next slide, please. So in terms of the kind of the nitty-gritty of all the different aspects of the proposal, if we look at the first criteria, which is the track record and research potential of the applicant, as I said, you know, there are many elements that are considered into this criteria, but particularly the ones that I put in bold there are significant, and the assessors will look at each one of them. So transnational mobility, intersectoral mobility, so whether you have already collaborated with other sectors and not just the academic sector, and then whether you have any scientific practical management experience, so if you have any kind of project management experience in the past. So the idea is, have you, when you, after you reread your proposal, have you ticked all of this? And if not, I would suggest just try to explain you know, anything. For instance, transnational mobility, you weren't able to spend much time in another country, but have you collaborated with universities in other countries? Have you attended conferences, symposia, etc. abroad? So all of this counts. And as I said, if you don't feel you're particularly strong in any of them, just try to explain and make up for it with additional elements. Next slide, please. The second criteria is, as I said, the training and career development aspects. So we give a generous budget for training opportunities during the fellowship. So what we would like to see is that the candidate already has some kind of an idea of how they're planning to spend this budget. So what is good, as I said, when you're applying for Career Fair Plus, is really to show that you have considered this and that you're basically willing to make the most of this training budget, again in the short, medium, and long term, and how this will this opportunity will take you to basically the next level in your career. Next slide, please. There's also the quality and research program. So basically the project idea, again, bring out any element of interdisciplinarity or multidisciplinarity, and also try to link this with the specific technology center or gateway that you're associating this proposal to. And then there's a final criteria, if you could change slides, which is basically about the quality of the host institution and the mentors. So again, we'd all like to see proposals where the company comes in as some kind of, tick the box exercise. So what the assessors will basically be asked to review the proposals on is whether the host academic institution and the mentor there and the partner company and the mentor there are the right fits for the project proposal and what the candidates would like to do in these 3 years. Finally, next slide, please. So this is the link where you can find all the information about the call and the proposal. It's a 3-year contract. It's quite competitive in terms of the salary allowances and, as I said, the training budget that is available. So I would definitely encourage you to go and take a look at it. There's still time to put together a good proposal. So I hope this intervention of mine today is timely, and I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Micol, for this in-depth insight into the program that you are having at hand and offering for researchers with refugee background. I think the demand is there and the challenges are large, but nonetheless, those who are going for it, I think we wish them all good luck. So it's now time to pass on to our third speaker, Dr. Amin Sharifi Isalu. He will share with us his experiences on how to integrate and succeed as a researcher in Ireland. He has a PhD in sociology and is a lecturer in the Department of Sociology and Criminology at University College Cork. Amin's fields of interest include politics, religion, arts, and culture, focusing on sociological and anthropological interpretations of symbols, images, and ritual performances. He's the author of various books. Most recently, Amin published Liminality in the Direct Provisional System, Living Under Extreme Rules and Conditions in 2020, and Liminality and Experience, the 1979 Revolution in Iran and Shia Religious Symbols in 2018, to name just these two. Amin, welcome. We're grateful that you are with us here today, and please take the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm honored and excited to join you today. First, I would like to use this opportunity to thank CARE and DAD for organizing and hosting this online talk on Ireland. Before talking about the key points, I would like to tell you a little about my own background as a refugee. Who is a refugee? Refugees are people who have lived in direct provision or camp before receiving the refugee status. They have usually experienced social isolation, dependency, uncertainty, emotional disturbance. When I was living in camp or direct provision, I could witness pathological mental health consequences. mostly were caused by sitting and waiting months and years for a refugee status. So I decided to walk and to move rather than sitting and waiting. After a few months, I could publish 2 short stories in a book called A Safe Harbor. The title of stories were A Walk in the Countryside and A New Ireland. And photos I took from the countryside, direct provision, and Cork City were exhibited in the Triskel Art Center in Cork. That is my background, but what are concrete support and what concrete support is needed for refugees, particularly refugees who they are conducting a research. I believe bridges should be built to help refugees to access the grants and funding in the higher education system, as research and teaching institutions, universities must ensure the ongoing development of new academics. While there is a growing interest in exploring the issues confronted by new academic, much remains to be done to better understand and improve the pathways of academic development, particularly for underrepresented people such as refugees. Bridges should be built to help refugees who have a degree. I mean, recognition of the academic document and the work experience of refugees. As Bahad Waj in 2006 did a research and outlined negative attitudes toward immigrants can result in a type of discrimination called skill discounting, whereby those with a foreign education and work experience are less valued or unvalued. Bridges should be built to help refugees to find a full-time position after completing their training and education, supporting refugees in finding a job, academic or non-academic, is very important. The prevalence of fixed-term, hourly, and occasionally contracts is one of the central problems associated with educated refugees. Uncertain employment cause stigmatization and depression. Usually, refugee researchers feel excluded and discriminated. Government policies on refugee education should be changed. In my time, there were different policies and different situations. We hadn't university sanctuaries at the time, and myself, I had to wait 3 years after getting my refugee status to be able to apply for a third level course. And I had a paper from the minister, and I was walking to universities, and I was asking them to register for a course, which one I like. But the problem was that they were saying me, you have to stay 3 years in Ireland after getting your refugee status. That was a problem that time, and 3 years I had to wait until I could be eligible to enter the third level education system. And I was showing them that I have a right as Irish person and I'm eligible, but nobody was accepting that. So a little bit situation changed. I'm working with UCC sanctuary group to help refugees and asylum seekers at the moment. That time we hadn't such a system. And I believe that refugee researchers should be supported during both the postgraduate and postdoctoral program. We know that when people feel supported, they typically experience less stress and adjust better than their counterparts who lack such support. All forms of discrimination and legal barriers in education should be eliminated and abolished. To do this, an experience of past can be employed to adopt a strategy of prevention, and the transition can best be managed to the benefit of refugees and our society. Postgraduate students and part-time tutors and lecturers who have families should be supported, for example, by enrolling refugee researchers and their family in university health insurance plan, if there is any. The other topic I would like to cover is academic terms. I mean, language training and support. As I highlighted, we need to provide refugees opportunities to have access to the grant or funding and the labor market. This is possible by building bridges, providing information, and providing scholarships for improving languages, grant writing skills, and accessing the funding bodies. For example, providing a regular and free advanced English classes to refugees can be very helpful. The other topic is about the practical terms, I mean logistic, financial, or administrative. We should consider a particular grant for refugee researchers to provide them opportunities to move around. For example, travel grant for attending conferences and summer schools. Refugee researchers need help with the grant application because really they are not good in, they haven't that experience, not they are not good, maybe I changed my sentence. They haven't any experience in completing the grant application. I think hiring academics who are well known in writing a successful grant proposal to review the grant application can be very helpful. The funding body should support the first application for the funding rather than considering the previous awards. We need to design and implement policies, and that is very important in EU level, particularly to provide equal access to resources for all refugee researchers, I mean, regardless of their location and socioeconomic status. And the other topic is the guidance, peer exchange, matchmaking. Refugees need information, training, and help for exchanging and matchmaking. Matchmaking can create a new field of study, providing opportunity to refugees to move around and to build a network. And exchanging is very important. For example, expanding the Erasmus Plus program and or creating a new exchange program will encourage refugees to move around and expand their academic network. Okay, the other topic I would like to talk about is what worked well in my case. In my case, walking and writing. First, I would like to highlight first thing helped me to move on. As I mentioned during living in the camp or direct provision, I started to walk and write. And I continued with the same thing during my undergraduate and my PhD. I had a degree from Iran in law, was not accepted here, so I had to start from undergraduate. I completed my undergraduate, and I did my PhD program. I completed my PhD, and I was working and writing. It helped me a lot. And local authority grant at this time and UCC childcare and studentships were very helpful during my PhD program, particularly there is small grants from for conferences and summer schools provided by the Department of Sociology. And working hard is very important. I need to mention that I really worked hard for completing my 4 years PhD program. I finished my PhD in about 3 years and 5 months. It was a 4-year program. And the other thing worked with me particularly was publication. I published books and papers without receiving any funding. So this showing my hard work. I didn't give up when I asked for funding and my applications were rejected. Okay, the other point is support and kindness of my colleagues at UCC, particularly in the Department of Sociology and Criminology that I have to mention about. But what not worked in my case after completing my PhD were application for a postdoctoral position and funding. Three takeaway home messages I have here for successful integration. First is walk and think. Walking and moving help to think, to stay healthy and to meet people and communicate with them. The second is hope and move on. Do not give up if your applications are rejected or you are discriminated. Third, work hard to achieve your aim. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amin, and thank you also to Micol and Roja. I think all three of you have provided a wide range of experiences and advices, be it structures, be it specific programs, or be it very personal experiences which were provided as well. Although we are a little bit beyond schedule, I think there is some time left for questions, and hopefully we can answer them. So may I once again ask the audience to just put a question maybe in the chat, or mute your microphone and ask your question, and we will listen attentively to you. Maybe in the meantime, I would just like to say something with respect to what was mentioned by I think all three of you. I think as in many countries, Ireland also offers a lot of experience and a lot of possibilities, and maybe a kind of better integration of all the initiatives with one another could make them even more fruitful. On the other hand, what we have found out is that I think both of you, Roja and Amin in particular, you brought in experiences from your academic background, from your home countries or the regions where you're originating from, which may be absolutely benefit for the universities or the institutions you're working now. So yeah, demand for more integration and as well as recognizing what you bring with you for the academia in the host country, Ireland in particular, is a benefit that I think needs to be highlighted. Is there anything that you might like to comment on my remark, or maybe on one of the things that was mentioned by one of your co-presenters. If this is not the case, maybe then I think everything that was worthwhile to be mentioned has been said. So as I said, we're a little bit beyond schedule. That gives me the opportunity to once again say thank you. Thank you to our partners, also to ARCA and EDUFI, and also to the team which is working in the background to make these online talks possible. I would like to give some information about the final Care Online talk, which we will conduct this Friday, which is at 11 o'clock CET. We will then have a look at all the things that came out on the national level and combine them and put them together on an EU level. So there's a kind of online talk which summarizes the outcomes and also has a look at EU measures as well. So if you have the opportunity and time to join us again, it would be great. Please feel free to hand over the information also to colleagues or people who might be interested. And hopefully we'll see you then again Friday this week. Thank you very much and have a very good day.